Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the Emotion Roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching. And this is Chuck Wolf. You're listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. It seems like a while since I've been here. It's always good to be back with you, and I want to thank everybody who's a regular listener for tuning in. The show is called The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And again, I'm Chuck Wolf, and this show is all about helping people out who are struggling with different situations in their life where somehow, some way, they're stuck. They're just uncertain how to proceed. They're doubtful about what to do next. They're just really confused about what's the best thing around a particular situation in their life that they should do in terms of getting something done, in terms of handling a conflict and working with others. There's all kinds of issues that we all face every day of our lives where our emotions are in play. And sometimes when our emotions are really strong and we're worried about them, and sometimes when we're worried about the emotions of others, or we're worried about something we might say or do that's going to cause an emotional upheaval for somebody that we care about, those are the kinds of situations that we entertain here on this show. My background, for those of you who are new and are listening for the first time, is really just someone who's got a psychology background. So I've been a counselor and a therapist in the past, and also I've worked over the last 20-some years in this field called emotional intelligence. And my reason for doing this show is to make this field of emotional intelligence come alive for you. And sometimes I like the idea of having a phone call or two or three or four on the course of the show, because it really encourages all of you to participate. And if you call in and you've got a situation that you're dealing with that is troubling to you in some ways, and you're uncertain about, I use what I call the Emotion Roadmap to help to guide what you might do next. And so if you call up feeling somewhat hopeless, at least uncertain and confused, what I like to do is to help create some certainty and help you form a plan that makes sense to you, that builds on your existing strengths, uses your own intuition and knowledge and experience, combined with what I've learned how to help people by using this Emotion Roadmap to give you the best chance possible to make an outcome as possibly satisfactory as you can. Because lots of times we don't know how to deal with emotional challenges because our training around emotions is spotty at best. We're doing a lot more in schools these days than we used to, but most of us that grew up that are young adults or older adults at this point didn't have a lot of training. So our experience with emotion is just that. It's our experience. It's what we've learned through trial and error. Now, maybe we've had some great mentors or parents in our lives who are really skilled at dealing with their emotions, and we learned from them. But as far as formal education, there really hasn't been a lot. There's a lot more coming, and I think that's great. But for many of us, we're just doing what we do every day and doing the best we can. But the best we can be enhanced, I believe, by learning about what I've called the Emotion Roadmap. And for those of you who are new, again, just simply if you can consider that there are times when how you're feeling isn't helpful. And if you were reflective and thought about, well, I know I'm not feeling what I want to feel. And if I could absolutely create any feelings I want in myself right now, and you thought about what those feelings might be, and then you crafted a plan that would take you from what you are feeling that isn't helpful to what you want to feel that might be even ideal to feel, How do you do that? Well, you do it in part by understanding the science of emotional intelligence and how emotions work. And we really don't have a lot of knowledge about that. And so I hopefully share some of the knowledge and education that I've come to have over the years with all of you that are listening. And if you listen all the time, hopefully you're getting really good at this stuff. And in helping you to understand how the science of emotion works, it's also critical, I think, to understand the art of counseling using emotional intelligence, of coaching using emotional intelligence, of leading using emotional intelligence. And the art is understanding who is it I'm dealing with. So if you just think about, if you happen to have children, that you have 3 children, let's say, and one of your children is really somebody that cares about others, has enormous empathy for others, and always wants to know how situations that are occurring are going to impact the people that she knows and cares about, or he knows and cares about. And another child that seems to be steeped in logic and always wants an explanation. You have to tell them in great detail why you were going on vacation to this place instead of these other places. And then you might have someone who's another child who has a different set of values, it seems, where they care about getting stuff done. They're just a go-getter. They're not so concerned about others. Not that they don't care about others, but that's not their main focus. And it's not that they don't care about logic. That's not their main focus. Their focus is, I just want to get outside and do something. I want to build something. I want to create something. I want to engage in competition in some game or sport of some kind. I want to be a musician. I want to do things. So my point is that you really want to understand how emotions work, and also how the person or people, key people that you're dealing with, work. So to me, there's science and art in this. So if you have something you want to call about, and you're familiar with the show, and again, I'm Chuck Wolf, and it's the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I'll give you the number to call in just a moment. But first, I know I have a lot of people that listen regularly, and every once in a while, when I remember, I just want to have a shout out to, I want to say hello. I want to say hello to Tom and Kay and Brian and Ann, and and also and to Arnie, and to Michael, and to Sharon. All of those of you that have told me you listen regularly, I just want to say hello to you. So, anyway, and to Howie. Howie's the other person I wanted to say hello to today. So anyway, if you're all seeing this, and I hope you enjoyed, at least me recognizing that you listen pretty often. Also, I want to just give you the phone number, because it's always more fun, I think, when people call in, and I can actually show you how this emotion roadmap works. The steps in the process are this. If you want to call in, you tell me about a situation that you have, that you're facing, that you're dealing with. Let's assume, for instance, that you just got feedback from someone that you work for. This is the time of year when a lot of people are getting an evaluation for the year. If you're in the workplace, chances are either recently or coming up, or sometime in this, around February to March, is when a lot of times people give you feedback. And when they give you feedback, they tell you about your year performance, and they tell you about it, and sometimes it's exactly what they've been telling you all year, which is great. A lot of times, though, it's a little different than what you thought you were going to get. And sometimes it's upsetting. Well, so let's assume, for instance, that you're going through this process, or you're about to go through this process, and you're feeling a certain way. Let's assume that you were told by the person who you work for all year long that you were doing amazing things. I can't believe how good you are. We've never had someone in this position accomplish so much. And then you get your review, and your review isn't outstanding. And yet all the verbiage around your review all year long said, I was outstanding. And so you're sitting in that moment with your manager, leader, boss, whatever you call the person, and the person's telling you this, and you're thinking to yourself, now wait a minute. Why don't I know that I got meets expectations instead of outstanding? How come that I don't know that? And you're trying to wrestle with that, and you're surprised, and you're also disappointed, and a little bitty is angry. Because sometimes, not at every level, but if you happen to be high up in an organization, your performance review ties into a bonus that can be substantial depending on your level in an organization. And when you get outstanding, it's a lot more money than it is than when you get meets expectations. So it isn't just listening and accepting and not thinking about it. There's some monetary repercussions. And so you're feeling kind of not only upset, but you also want to be strategic, because I can't just say I'm mad about this. I got to think, is there any way I can turn this around? Is there something I can say right now that isn't going to get me in trouble, but is going to reinforce that all the time that you told me this year I did all these outstanding things and I just met expectations? I'm confused. What's the difference between what I was hearing all year and what you're telling me now? How come there's a gap? So anyway, if you've got that kind of experience, or any experience where you're feeling like you got a conversation coming up where you feel you're going to say something to somebody and you know it might cause some emotional upheaval for them, how do you want to deal with it? And so when you tell me a little bit about your circumstance and situation, I then walk you through this roadmap. And the roadmap is, okay, so how are you feeling? Because obviously you're key to this. And who else is key? Is it a one-person conversation you're about to have with someone about performance? Are you the one who just got reviewed and you want to know what you might say to your boss in terms of trying to turn this around somehow? But how are you feeling? We start with that. And how is the person you want to talk to feeling right now, based on your best guess? Because obviously you're not them, but you probably have some information, at least an hypothesis about how they might be feeling. Now, having said that, how do you want to feel? Is it different than how you are feeling? So obviously, if you've been reviewed and you got a performance review and it's less than what you expected, you're not feeling great. There's no way you're feeling great about it. You're probably feeling, again, disappointed, maybe even angry, depending on the circumstance. Well, how do you want to feel, though? What would be ideal to feel? What would be ideal to feel in a circumstance like that? Well, you have to call up and tell me your situation, and I'll tell you what would be ideal to feel. So we talk about what would be ideal to feel. And then we talk about how to get there. How can you create a better feeling than what you're feeling now, even an ideal feeling? What would it be, first of all, and how do you get there? So let's say you're feeling very disappointed, and you want to feel very encouraged and engaged and supported, as opposed to disappointed and disengaged. So one question would be, how do I get myself to feel this way? And if it involves the other person, let's say it's your leader, boss, manager, supervisor, whatever, and you want them to feel a different way, like maybe they made a mistake and you want them to feel apologetic. But not just apologetic. You want them to feel engaged and supportive of your desire to be seen and ranked at a higher level. That's a possibility. That's how you want them to feel. So then we talk about, how do you craft that? How do you create a situation, a statement, an email, a telephone conversation, a face-to-face conversation that basically puts them and you on a journey towards feeling the way you want to feel instead of how you are feeling. You want to think of any plan that you can come up with that has mostly upside. Any plan that is involved with confrontations of some kind, and this is one of them, has some risk to it. So you want to manage and minimize the risk as best you can, and also put as much of a positive spin on the conversation as you think is credible. You don't want to flatter or be insincere. That is, the lack of authenticity usually derails a conversation as opposed to pulls it forward. So you want to be authentic, you want to be sincere, but you also want to be thoughtful about how to thank people and be grateful for and appreciative of anything that's been done that's been really helpful to you accomplishing all these great things this year. At the same time, you want to see if you can change the evaluation. By the way, pretty darn hard to change once they're done and once they're in the system. Not impossible, but really hard. And maybe the best you can hope for sometimes is that the money associated with the higher review can come your way. Sometimes it's easier to get the money for you than it is to get the review changed. I'm curious, but that's how organizations seem to work. So anyway, the idea of the emotion roadmap and your calling in is that if I can help you with something that has to do with work or home or community or anywhere in your life, where you're struggling somewhat, I ask you to, again, talk about the situation, and we kind of walk through like I just did in that other scenario, where how are you feeling? Who's key to what you're doing? How is he or she or they feeling? What would be ideal for you to feel? What would be ideal for him or her or them to feel? And how do we get there? How do we get there? And getting there is understanding, again, how emotions work. That's the science of emotion. I'll help you with that. And then understanding a bit about you so I know how it's going to work for you. How can you make this work? So partly it's about science and partly it's about art. The art is knowing about you. And I help you kind of think through what we need to know about you that will help us to guide where you go so that when we hang up the phone call, you're feeling confident and hopeful instead of feeling helpless and hopeless. That's the goal. And in helping anyone that calls, everybody learns. That's the beauty of the show. That's the reason for doing the show. So let me give you the number. I'm going to give it to you a few times and see if anybody wants to call. 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. Now, if you're thinking about calling and you're wondering, I'm not sure if I should do this. First of all, what do you got to lose? That's one question, right? You have nothing to lose and potentially, hopefully, a lot to gain. And even if you're a little uncomfortable with calling in and talking about something that is a situation that you haven't figured out on your own, know that not only are you getting some help, but you're helping everybody because everybody benefits. Everybody learns when somebody calls in. That's the goal. So let me give you the number again. It's 203-336-9756. And you get the best of my attention at the beginning of the show because towards the end I'm trying to manage the time. But I'm on from 12 to 1, or 5 to 1 actually, on the radio station at 89.5 FM. You can listen to it streaming at wpkn.org, and you can also listen to it on podcast later on in case you happen to miss a show. It's on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. And also I put a number of the shows, often shows that I do where there are interviews, on something called Public Radio Exchange, prx.org, and you type in Emotion Roadmap and you'll find a number of my shows there as well, prx.org. So again, if you have something you'd like to call in about, and maybe it's something at work and maybe it's something at home, the number to call is 203-336-9756. And I encourage you to pick the phone up now and make that call so that you're sure to get in. Because I'm here by myself, and if I get more than one caller at a time, I can't take the second call until the first one's done. So one more time, 203-336-9756. So while I'm waiting for the phone to ring, I often have a topic that I want to talk about today. And the reason for using the example I did is I would like to talk a little bit about feedback and also about a really fascinating project that I'm engaged in with one of the very largest oil companies in the world. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But first, I'd like to just stay on this theme of feedback for a moment. In fact, maybe you don't have a problem today, but you might want to call in and just share. I'd like to know if you've ever had a discussion where you've gotten feedback, either in a formal review or just after some kind of coaching session where someone sat down and worked with you around some changes that they'd like to see. And they really did it well. They really did it well. Kind of like you might think of it as a best practice. Have you ever had an experience where somebody actually sat you down, said, we're going to have a conversation about a situation that took place whenever it was, maybe recently, yesterday, today, within the last month, or we're going to go over a review over several months about things that we've been working on. I just want to give you some concrete, constructive, specific feedback. I want to tell you about the things that I really, really liked, that I want to see you continue. I want to tell you about the things that I thought, these are good, but you need to do them more often. So you have the skill set, we know that. You need to engage that skill more. And then also I want to talk to you about some things that I think you need to do less of, and there's even one or two that I think you need not to do at all. Anyway, a conversation that, it doesn't talk about all those things at one time, but can cover any of those kinds of situations and feedback. Has anybody ever had the experience of working with someone that did it really well that you could share with us on the phone? Because that's another way we learn. If we learn by example, if we learn what people really like and what was done that they really enjoyed, if you could give me some thoughts about that, that's great too. So if you've got somebody that in your life did something really special for you and was able to give you some feedback that mattered and made a difference and did it in a very constructive way, love to hear that story. So it's 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. While I'm waiting, I'll tell you about a time that someone did this for me. My career has been kind of fascinating in the sense that I've worked in lots of different places with lots of different companies and lots of different people. And I think I might have attention deficit disorder, and I really like doing lots of different things. So for me, I the way that you can leverage sometimes perhaps what some might consider a deficiency, like attention deficit disorder, is if I get a little bored with the fact that I've been working for financial services companies, well, my next client is working with the Army. If I'm working with the Army and I'm tired of that, maybe my next client is working with a university and a management school. Maybe my next client is with a small business or with a manufacturing firm. So it's just fun for me. I've enjoyed working in healthcare with information technologists, with actuaries, with engineers, with scientists, with underwriters, all kinds of folks. I've worked with car dealerships, and I've worked with small manufacturers and large. So it's fun for me because I so enjoy understanding the human dynamic. But one of the things that I did in my career was I early on had wanted to be a school counselor. And I'd worked in schools and then did a number of things while I was in schools as part-time work. I served as a radio talk show host many years ago. I had a show called Family Education and Understanding. It was all about raising children. And then I also was a therapist working with a psychiatrist for a while. Also psychology professor at a number of different universities as an adjunct. And I'd worked as a salesman. I sold door to door full of brush when I was a kid. I actually worked on a truck. My dad was a truck driver. So I've seen lots of different kinds of situations and workplaces, and always was fascinated by what I'd see around me and how people behaved. Always interested in human behavior. Curious about it, in fact. Curious about very strange behaviors, why people would engage in them. So I've always had that interest. Well, one of the things that I did was I went to work as a school counselor. It's my main primary job, and then I wanted to change careers, and so I got accepted to Harvard University, and I worked in the executive program for management development for a time at Harvard Business School, and then I worked for Exxon. And in working for Exxon, it was very different than working in a school system, as you might imagine, and even very different than working in a prestigious business school. Exxon was an amazing company, it still is, and when I went to work for them, I was unique in a way because most of the people that went to work for Exxon got hired either as a civil engineer or a chemical engineer or some kind of engineer right out of undergraduate school from top schools, or they got hired as with typically still an engineering background, but also MBAs from prestigious business schools like Harvard and others. And somehow, some way, I got recruited by Exxon when I was at Harvard, and I went to work for them. And in my experience working for them, I was different because everybody else that went to work for them had either started their career right out of their undergraduate work or after a master's degree. And so most of them had come in at either 19 or 20 or so, or about 23 or 24. I was coming into work at Exxon at 35 years old. And one of the things that my boss said to me one time in terms of giving me feedback that was really constructive and meaningful was this. He said, Chuck, I have to apologize to you because I've been judging you harshly at times because you didn't seem to operate with the norms that everybody in Exxon seems to know. And I have to pinch myself and remember that you haven't been here since you're 24 years old, or since you're 20 years old. You just came to us a year ago, and you aren't steeped in the norms and the culture that everybody else who's 35 years old has experienced for at least 10 to 13 to 14 years. And so I want to make sure that you and I spend time that I wouldn't spend with anybody else because they wouldn't need it, on some of the norms that exist here that I don't think you understand enough about, and it's causing some problems interpersonally with some of the people here. And I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming myself for not being smarter about this in the beginning. But there are things that you need to work on. And so part of me was feeling like, okay, this is some criticism coming my way because of a few people, and there was a couple of people that I was having some difficulties with. And he presented it in a way that we own this together. And he accepted that he could have and should have, he was saying, been smarter about understanding how to manage somebody that didn't start from the day they left college, either as an undergraduate or graduate, right away with Exxon. And I thought about that, and my initial reaction was when somebody gives you feedback, you feel a little defensive. No, it's normal to do that. And then your initial instinct is to try and justify or somehow excuse your behavior in a way so that the criticism isn't real somehow. And yet, I knew the criticism was real to a degree. I also knew that these other people, wasn't just norms that were the issue. There's some other stuff. But I really appreciated the way he said this. And I also, at the time, didn't really understand the normative stuff, other than to know there was something I was missing and I didn't know what it was. And he had offered to teach me about it. And then over time, as I learned what he was pointing out, I realized that some of the things that I had done had triggered some things that I didn't understand. And it caused some of and it wasn't all just norms, but there was some of the conflict was definitely tied into my not having been there. And I after this had gone on for a little bit, I said, his name was Roy. I said, Roy, one of the things that you said to me early on was about you not getting this right in the beginning and being a little apologetic about it. I said, from what I can see and what I understand now is hardly anybody ever manages anyone in this organization that doesn't start the same as everybody else. So please understand, I don't blame you for that. I mean, this was the first time for you. It was the first time for me. And I'm just glad you're the person that I work for, and you understood this, and you took the time to make me feel good about something that was not working the way we wanted it to work. And you helped me to turn that around by feeling like we own this together. And that was great. That was a great conversation we had. And things did get better with the people that that he knew and I knew that he was talking about. And I won't say that they became my best friends, but I think that knowledge of what the organization expected and how people behaved internally in that group and why they did what they did was incredibly helpful for me. It wasn't always a great fit because it was different and I didn't get raised with them and it wasn't part of my experience. But once I understood it, I was able to fit in and have a sense of belonging that didn't really exist in the same way before that conversation. So I hope the idea of what I'm saying to you is that when feedback is presented in a way that says, I'm supportive of you, I care about you, I own some of this, and Chuck, there are things you need to change. That's different than just saying, Chuck, come on in. There's a problem with these people. I want to figure out what to do about it and what you're doing wrong, which is often how it shows up. And that's where your mind just generates this high level of defensiveness and angst. And while you might not share it in the meeting, you walk away, at least I do, talking to myself about, why is this happening? that person didn't do this I don't like that he said that to me, and these other people, a lot of it's their fault. What about calling them? I mean, so, the kind of things that happen to people, the self-talk that goes on in your mind when you get criticized in any way is something you have to deal with. All of us do. But what do we do with it? What do we do with the self-talk when it happens? So I'll talk more about that, but I'll give you a minute to see if you want to call in and just share a story that you might have about feedback. A time someone gave you feedback and it really worked out well. 203-336-9756. So if you're out there, you got a story. Maybe it's the time you gave somebody feedback and you thought it went really well. That's great too. 203-336-9756. This is always a tricky time because now I wonder are there people out there listening? And I know there are. Are they listening maybe later when there's a podcast, or they're watching it on YouTube or a video? Or is it some other situation where people just, they don't have anything to say, but they're listening? Well, okay, let me give you a couple of examples where feedback wasn't done so well. So I actually have someone that I'm coaching that had this experience where he had an incredible year. This is similar to what I brought up in the very beginning. And he didn't get the rating he wanted. And in his particular company, the ratings are force ranked. And if you don't know what that means, I'll take a second to explain it. It means that if you have a group of 5 people working with you, only one of them can be a top performer, and one of them has to be a bottom performer. And the other 3 are somewhere in between. So if you have a ranking scale of 1, 2, and 3, 3 being high, 1 being low, you have 1, 3, you have 1, 1, and you have 3 2s. You have to have that. You have to force rank. I don't like those systems. I don't think they're fair. But I understand why they're out there. They're out there because most people don't want the situation where they have to give people honest rankings. Because if I'm honest about the 5 people I have working for me, maybe I feel like, none of them got a high ranking, but they all think they got a high ranking. They're all decent. I don't want to lose any of them. I don't want to make any of them angry. But I know if I tell any of them that they didn't meet expectations, and maybe 2 of them didn't, they mostly did, but they didn't overall meet expectations, and the other 3 met most of the expectations, so I can give them 3 2s, meaning that they met expectations, 3 of them, and 2 of them didn't meet expectations, and I'm going to have a rebellion on my hands. So I'm just going to give everybody a 3, whatever money I have in a pool of money. This is how this works. If I have 10 grand to give out for merit increases, I'm just going to give everybody 2,000 and tell them that's the way we did it. Everybody got the same. And I'm not going to think about it anymore. That's how a lot of people do this. And for the very high performer who feels like they're carrying a much heavier load than anybody else, that upsets them. For the people that are just showing up and doing what they need to do and going home at the end of the day and not thinking about it, they're good with that. And the person that is coasting a little bit thinks that, I got away with it again. That's what happens in a lot of organizational life. So some companies have said, you know what, unacceptable. We want real performance ratings so that while you may have everybody who's met expectations, doesn't matter. We're going to force you to say somebody didn't. So you're going to have to take a really hard look and say, of everybody and all the expectations of my team, who did the least in terms of meeting expectations? Even though this person met almost everything and I want to give them a 2, I have to give them a 1 because everybody else did meet expectations and even a bit more. And maybe I have 2 people that were exceptional years, and I can only give one of them the high number. So you can see where it's a problem, but it forces you to really think hard about what number you're going to give out then, in ways that you wouldn't necessarily if left to your own devices. Feedback and performance reviews, it's a fascinating world and filled with emotional stuff. And I've done a lot of work in it, and I'm trying to help companies with it and have some innovative ways of dealing with it. But I'm going to wait again and see if anybody wants to call, because it's more fun if you call. So 203-336-9756. Have you got a story about feedback? How about, I know there's lots of these out there. How about a time when it wasn't done well? How about a time when somebody did it really poorly? You want to talk about that? 203-336-9756. I'll give it a minute. Well, it's not a day for phone calls, I guess. Okay. So let me tell you about the project. This is a little different. This is a little different tack I'm going to take right now. Inside organizations, many of the companies that are out there have a list of competencies, a set of competencies that sound like. Oh, is this not working? Oh, maybe the phone isn't working. Oh. Okay, go ahead. All right, well, all right. Somebody, thank you for the call. I guess the phone wasn't working the way it's supposed to. This is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Who am I talking to, please?
Hi, Chuck. My name is Ann.
Hi, Ann.
I really enjoy your program.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So, I don't know if I have anything specific. I'd rather talk about some things that you pointed out nicely. The main one being that, we're all doing this DIY. We're not trained in personal relations, and it's too bad. I don't know how that can be addressed. But.
What is DIY? I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
Oh, do it yourself.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you.
We go to YouTube and we replace engines and.
Oh, I see.
Put in our own windows and.
I know a lot of people do that, and I actually have done a few things like that myself. I'm not terribly handy, but once in a while I'll look at a YouTube, so I understand what you're saying. Well, first of all, just thanks for calling in, Ann. I appreciate it. So, what particular things are you interested in talking about?
Oh, well, I wonder if because none of us really knows what we're doing, and it's kind of rare to find somebody probably who handles either the receiving end of sudden and bad news or giving it.
Right.
But one thing I think after having received it, which I'm sure everyone has in some context or other, is that probably people don't. I think one of the general problems with handling our emotional responses constructively is that we don't own our emotions. We don't know how. We don't take the time or can't take the time to identify them, and with all the things that you talk about. That takes time, and maybe even transferring. Well, or not maybe. Quite a bit of transferring of emotional language to some other verbal way of expressing it. And so I think maybe one of the general things that people can do more is, absorb the information. If they came back to a bot, I think they should plan whether, you talk about the short-term goals, ways of handling it, and maybe some long-term things. If one were to decide to go back to the boss, say, and say, just like to deal with this a little bit more, or talk about some of the issues, identify how I can turn this around. So first of all, there's already been an assumption made that people may not have thought out clearly. Are you going to say, are you going to feel, and are you going to say that you want to work on or change the situation that was laid out? So that already takes some analysis. you know?
Absolutely.
Or are you going would your approach be, maybe your approach might be different. And that really has to be thought out. Maybe maybe the receiver of the bad news is actually quite angry.
Right.
And feels justified. Then the approach would be slightly or very different. You know, to say, I am so passionate about this. Who knows whether that's the right tack to take? But only in kind of writing it down and deciding what it is you're feeling would you even be able to make a start.
Right. And you've mentioned a number of things that are incredibly insightful, really. And I'm curious, what's your background?
Sort of overeducated and underappreciated. No, I'm a book editor mostly, so I get exposed to a lot of certainly the verbal ways of approaching ideas.
Interesting. Well, let me talk a couple of things that you've said. So one of the things is like being aware of what we're feeling, and it does take some time to step back and kind of think through about how I'm feeling, and sometimes people have the experience of having their feelings take them over almost, and when you realize that that's happening, it takes some courage to actually think about what am I doing, and trying to gain control back over yourself. But for a lot of people, they're just unaware, and it's really remarkable. And this is a little bit of the science, and that is that there's a part of the assessment that sometimes I use with people that measures people's emotional abilities, and one of the abilities is to identify or perceive the emotions you're actually experiencing yourself and in others. And I actually wrote a paper about this because some people are really, really poor at this. Even if they took the time, they don't have the aptitude or skill to do it, which is kind of remarkable. And they don't.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like kids who do some funny behavior, something around food, or they run around the house 8 times or something, but it's not at all what you would think the issue is. But,
So when you say somebody would, what you think you're saying, you might not understand necessarily correctly what's actually happening for somebody. Is that right?
Oh, right. Well, I think that happens all the time.
Okay.
People drink too much, or they do something, but which looks kind of like depression, or it looks kind of like, or it feels like something, but maybe the issue is anger. In fact, at a lot of things, or anger might. They've recently found, surprise, that. Depression has a lot of anger in it.
It can.
Right, it can. Yes. Sorry. So go ahead.
Well, I guess some of the things is often we feel not just one feeling, but either a combination of feelings, or some feelings are actually like contempt is a combination of disgust and anger together. So there's some wisdom, and you talked about trying to have a language for feelings, and sometimes we're people, because we don't have much education around this, and maybe as a book editor you see lots of different novels that you might, I don't know what kind of books you edit, but if you read a lot, sometimes you get some in-depth character analysis and understand how people feel, at least the way the authors depict them. But most of us don't have a very large vocabulary to talk about our feelings. And so when we're limited, and when somebody says, well, how are you feeling? It's really hard for us to say, because we know we're feeling something, but we don't have a term of, some kind of verbal description that can really accurately depict what we're feeling. And so it's hard to talk about it. So we don't. Even our self-talk is confused sometimes because we don't have a language that we're even saying to ourselves, never mind to anybody else.
Absolutely. And what do you think about the role of, so I think we're kind of getting to something about verbalization here. What about the issues, and I guess the role of analyzing what about, say, is there a value to someone in a situation with the job? And I know somebody who was in that position, exactly that position, and reacted defensively, and it sounded like it to me.
Right.
Didn't help. That they seemed to be quite against her, and then the firing came. It really seemed incredibly sudden and very unfair, and they wouldn't say that it was because of this one particular job, but, it certainly looked that way. So that, I'm sorry, that's a little bit off from, I'm just saying that we have been in that position, but what about the value of, I think we're very emotionally invested, say, in our jobs, just whether
Sure.
for good or bad,
Right.
healthily or not. But we don't take the time, I think, to analyze what we feel about having a job, about working. And I think this is some of the problem. It's not just that we don't understand our emotions, but that they're in fact very distracted almost from what some of the issues are. Well, we don't have a chance to grow up in a way into sometimes a healthy and expressive identity. Because we don't really know what we've been thrown into. We don't understand it, and it was kind of happened without us. And
Well, let me,
or is that confusing?
No, let me try and actually give you something concrete that might be a way to try and do a little bit better at this, because I think you raise a lot of interesting issues. So some of the issues are based on what are your abilities, and if people have limited ability to recognize emotions in others or in themselves, then they're operating on false assumptions. They think they know and they don't. And that's a problem. And if you become aware that you are limited in your ability to recognize emotions in others, you need other ways to compensate. So one of the things I think that if a person who finds himself in difficulty in relationships lots of times with many different people, it's usually not about the other people, it's something about them. And it's about them not understanding how other people are feeling and the way that the other people are feeling about the person and how people experience being with the person. And so one of the things that particular person can do differently is to ask people, well, what do you think about what I just said? Because if you ask, what do you think, you'll hear how people feel. If you ask how people are feeling, they may not want to tell you. But if you ask, what do you think, it's interesting how it works. People will tell you how they feel. So that's one strategy for people who might not be good at identifying. If they know they're not good at it, anytime that they're saying something that has the potential to be controversial or generate conflict in some form or manner, they can simply ask, so after they say something, so what do you think about that? And if they get some feedback and pushback against it, don't get defensive. Just really try to listen more to understand what you might have been missing. That's one approach. The other thing, which is, to try and pay more attention to our feelings, which takes time. This definitely takes time. But if you want to get better at this, one of the things that you can do, and this whole concept of an emotion roadmap, you also talked about not really knowing what the other person is feeling, and not really being prepared, or how somebody lost a job because they got defensive around a certain situation that happened in the workplace, maybe around performance or something else. But it probably was more than just one time, but maybe that was kind of like the tipping point. And often when people do lose jobs, it's often because relationships aren't working the way that they're supposed to work. And so one of the things that you do is anytime you feel like you want to say something that you know another person is going to be upset about, but it's because you're upset and maybe you're defensive about something you just heard, instead of reacting, just kind of holding back, asking the person to tell you as much as they can about what they're upset about and why they're mad at you or whatever they're saying to you, and then say, thank you, I think I got it. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. And walking away, because when you're in the heat of the moment, most people aren't really great at saying things constructively that address the situation without getting into an argument and sounding really defensive, at which point things just spiral down instead of up. So
absolutely.
So that's a strategy. And one other thing I'll say, just as one, because again, I think you raised some wonderful points, and that is one of the things that I do when I'm trying to teach people how to be more emotionally intelligent in some of the work that I do, is I'll ask them, I say, look, some of the things that happen in life are, they're obviously a problem, and, you're going to think about maybe at that point how you're feeling emotionally and what might be better to feel. But most days we don't have things like that. Hopefully we don't have a lot of those things anyway, but we have some. And so those are obvious ones. But if you're not in good practice in thinking about how to deal with emotions constructively, when they show up on occasion, you won't remember how to deal with them. So if you want to deal with even small things better every day, then most of us have something like a smartphone or a computer where we keep a calendar or even a hand calendar. And we just write down over the next 3 weeks at 10:30, at 2:30, and at 7:30 at night, I'm going to ask myself, how am I feeling? And is it how I want to feel? And how are the people around me that I'm working with or need to get things done through, or people at dinner, or wherever I am, how are the people closest to me that are important to whatever it is I'm doing? How is he or she or they feeling? And you do it 3 times a day for a few weeks. And just pay attention. Force yourself to pay attention to how you're feeling. And if it's not how you want to feel, ask yourself, if I'm not feeling a feeling that's helpful, what can I do different? What would cause me to feel something that would be better, even ideal to feel right now? And then think about it and do it if it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I just think your show and your development of ideas is just incredible. I don't know if people think about if they'd really do these things and would follow them, but it would be great, wouldn't it?
Well, hopefully the people that listen, I think regularly, hopefully are doing these things and they're getting better at it, because it's all about your willingness and your level of motivation to take this on as something you want to make part of you. If you want, here's a quick example, and I've got to go in a minute. So I'm working with this person on this project, and one of the things he's going to do is he wants to test an assessment we're creating for project managers in this company, and the assessment says, okay, how are you? There's a certain list of behaviors he wants to create for people that the company has said everybody needs to do better at. And so, you can say everybody needs to do better at it, but how do people actually learn to do better at it? That's the question we want to answer. And one of the things is we said, do you, rate how well you are in relating to other people. Let's say that's one of the competencies. And let's say you're on a 1 to 5 scale, you give yourself a 3. Pretty good, but not great all the time. And then ask the question, how much do you know about the role of emotion in relating to other people? 1, 2, or 3. 1, I know nothing. 2, I never think about. I think about it somewhat. 3, I think about it all the time, and I'm good at it. So if you can show that if people don't really think about the emotions that are in play that relate to relationships, and you can teach them about the emotions that are in play as it relates to relationships, they got to be better. And that's what we're going for.
Right. And just want to remind people and myself, that I think you're talking about a very long, hopefully a lifetime process.
Right.
It's not just those flare-ups that may even continue to happen and kind of blindside you. But little by little, it's these other practices of seeing. We may not ever learn how to handle being blindsided very well. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Yeah.
I do, and I don't want to blindside you, Ann, but I've got to go. My show's over.
Oh, great. Thanks for talking to me.
Oh, thanks so much for the call, Ann. I really appreciate it. You have a great day.
Great. Love your show. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Folks, you've been listening to the Emotion Roadmap. This is Chuck Wolf. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I'll be back next week. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Thanks for listening. WPKN 89.5 FM. Listener-supported radio. Bye-bye.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.